All right, so it is 2:30. Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, well, I don't think I cover up to what the Kahoot was asking, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, hopefully I'm on pace to finish this thing against three different languages. Gonna be a little bit hard to finish off, but I guess still people joining. But I think for the time purpose, I'm gonna jump right into it. Um, okay, so I'm going to screen share um, real quick. All right, and then can I put the chat on? Sure, it's good. Okay, so this is essentially where we left off for everything, right? We did talk about all the selectors and what it does, and there's one really special selector that I haven't talked about. It's called the wildcard. So when you put an asterisk and then everything in here, so it selects all of the elements of the whole entire HTML like website, and then you can change like we'll just say background color. We're gonna change it to we're gonna change everything to have a cyan, dark cyan background. You can see everything becomes dark cyan, even the page, the body itself becomes dark cyan. You can see like obviously the one that we were selecting that we manually changed the background with still stays, right? Class 2 still has the same, well, at least background. But yeah, so if you select everything, yeah, you're gonna change the background. And also you can change the font family. So when you change font, so this is like switching to like let's say a Comic Sans, whatever, right? Like we can try to do Arial, and then we're gonna have another thing called sans serif. So what this means is that we're gonna preferably use the font of Arial, but if it's not like available, then what happened is HTML is going to default to sans serif. So sans serif itself, it's a font. So what it does is change everything to a generic font, but we can specify Arial to it, and it's going to change a little bit more. So sometimes Arial can't be loaded properly. It's going to load to sans serif. Sans serif comes with most, I guess, most browsers, most like I think all of the browser and stuff. So like they can defaultly render sans serif, no problem. It's just some of them might not have the font of Arial, so then it will just switch to sans serif automatically. That makes sense. So yeah, if you select all of them and then change the font color, definitely everything is going to become this font, right? Everything becomes Arial. So one thing you might be noticing is that these everything from here is going down directly, like down, down, down. But then you have link to MasseyHacks and then the image tag like closed up together. So why is that? So this is where we're going to talk about something called the display CSS type. So from here, we're going to just, I guess, give an ID to this. I'm going to call it MasseyHacks. I'll just short form to MH link. So this is going to be how we're going to select this. So I'm go over here, select the link. So in here, we're going to have this called display CSS property. So for links, so for A tags default, by default, it is an inline. It's called something called, oh, sorry. Can I put that here? Okay, there we go. Something called an inline. So in here, inline block, you can see here. And this is essentially what this is. It's an inline block. So you're asking what is that? So inline block is something that can be like styled together, like kind of like stacked together horizontally. So you can see the link to MasseyHacks is going to be like chained with this. Like it doesn't go to its own like line kind of thing. It doesn't automatically set its width to be 100%. But if we have something called block, you can see this change all the way up here. So what does this mean is that a block element tries to take the whole entire width of the whole entire screen as much as possible. So this is what it does, essentially. So yeah. And you can see this is all part, this whole entire thing is part of this element. Actually, if you do inspect element, actually, I didn't show you guys inspect element, which is kind of sad. So you right click, inspect, and then if you hover on this A tag, you can see this goes all the way. It stretches all the way throughout the whole entire website. So this is what block does. Block automatically sets the width of this whole entire tag into the max width of the container, which in this case, actually, this container, it's the body. You can see here, yeah, this is wrapped inside this body. So body, it's kind of like a div as well, essentially. It's like a fancy div, but yeah. And there's another thing. You can see how it doesn't touches. So if you see the border, if you just hover around it, you can see that it never touches. There essentially there is something called a padding to this this whole entire what do you call body here. So this is what we call like this is like just a general thing that every CSS people do. It's that you have to set padding equals 0 and then margin 0. So what this does, it sets padding and margin to everything. So for CSS and HTML, I'll talk about padding and margin a little bit later, but CSS has its own default kind of like HTML has its own default like CSS styling, which, you know, obviously sometimes you want to make them across and stuff, and you want to specify your own margin padding usually. So you don't really want to like, you know, like let the default like property sets its place kind of thing. And also there's something called box sizing that a lot of people do, equals border box. And you don't really have to know what this means. It's just when you set the width, actually I'll talk about later, but yeah, when I introduce you guys to the box model, which you guys might seen it in Kahoot, and I didn't really talk about, which I'm still pretty sad about. But yeah, so all the selector aside, there are other like selectors that is like, you know, out there. A good thing is if you go to my workshop, I have linked a style sheet that I use to learn these things. So in selector, let me just show you guys how cool this is. And it shows like this universal. So the wildcard that we just said, select element. If you just don't really confuse what I was saying, just refer back to this. And this is such a great just tool to have when you are doing it. And I really, really like this. And also it came with a dark mode, but I'm a light mode user, so deal with it. But yeah, that's about it for this thing. And now we're going to talk about CSS units. So that's the important part. That's another Kahoot that we're going to talk about. So CSS units, they're generally, well, we'll just say, actually, I'm gonna like delete a lot of it because I don't think we need all these things anymore. Now we're talking box model. I really just don't want a lot of things in my page. So let's refresh this to nothing, and we're just gonna have a div. And we have inside this div, I want to have like a header. I mean h2 tag. Well, let's do h2 heading 2. Okay, so we're gonna have just a heading 2 here, and to make this, so we're gonna set a class of this div. We're gonna say it as a container of this whole entire h2 tag, and then we're gonna put h2 tag having a class of heading and then 2. I like to use class more than ID just because you can set like as I said before, you can pull a lot of class together, and all the like elements CSS style can change from just by adding a class. You can change some like the style of it just by adding, but like if you have ID in there, then ID is going to take over the priority, which you can change sometimes with just by adding a class to it. And that's when you want to add class to it, right? You're essentially using JavaScript sometimes to add class to it to quickly change the styling, but you can't really change the styling that you refer to using IDs because it's more specific, if that makes sense. So usually I use class. I only use ID like maybe like having a big container or whatever, a big section that I'll use ID, but usually I just do class. Class works just as well as IDs in my opinion. But yeah. Okay, so since we deleted all of these, we're gonna still use this because that's just like a template to how you start a style sheet. And we're gonna have a class container. So I mean a class called container, and we're gonna set the background. So we're gonna analyze the background a little bit. So we're gonna set the background to aquamarine. So yeah, that's the background. And yeah, I think we'll just start with this. Now we're gonna pull up the good old trusty box model here. If you guys can see it. You can see how box model, so this is what every HTML element in terms of their styling consists of. So their content, which is the width and height. So if you can see here in our content, in this example of this div, right? This div has a content of heading of this h2 tag. And also, coincidentally, you can actually we can change heading to have a background of, let's say, blue line. And what you can see here, it has taken over precedent of everything because for heading 2, the content is the text itself. So in terms of this div, this h2 is the content of this div. So when this div say, here's my content, it's referring to the h2. But in h2, when it says h2 is like saying, here's my content, it refers to this text, this raw text of heading 2. That makes sense. Anyways, moving on. So the whole entire thing, the content for in this case, if we're gonna refer to the container that we set up, the div, it's gonna be this h2 tag. But the content in terms of the heading 2 is gonna be this raw text of heading 2. That makes sense. Anyways, and then we're gonna have something called padding. So padding is the space between the like the padding is the space between the border and the content. So it is within here. So if you set the box sizing to be border box, which is what we did here, when we refer to the width and height, it's gonna be the content plus the padding, if that makes sense. If you don't have this border box, if you just remove this whole entire thing, if you're gonna set the width and height, that's only gonna be the content itself. But usually, most developer put box sizing to border box, so then it will have the padding and the content. I think also the border is included in the width and height as well. So everything in border and padding is going to be accounted for the height and width. And then you're going to have, so border, not really a lot of people uses it. It's usually for debugging purposes. And then you have this should be padding, by the way, sorry. And then margin is going to be space between elements. So what we mean by that is we have multiple, so again, we can have another div container. And then we can set, again, you can do like container to like as many div as you want because it's a class. So it's not unique for everyone. So you can put that for anyone that you want to be applied with. So in container, we can have something called margin, right? And then we can set it to, let's say 5 pixels. So pixel, it's a unit. Don't worry about that. We'll talk about later. If you just put that, sorry about that. And you can see how it has a, like between them, you can see between them, it's gonna have this white space. So this is the space margin, right? So if you're gonna take a ruler and measure the space between them, this white space is actually 10 pixel because 5 pixel for heading 2, the first heading 2, another 5 pixel for the bottom heading 2. So in total, the space between it should be like 10 pixel. Anyways, and yeah, so you can see, so margin is between it, and we can also do container padding. So padding, set it to 5 pixel as well, and you can see here, boom. And now this is where you see how we set the heading to have a background of blue violet and the container a background of aquamarine. So when you put padding around the container, you can see, wow, it still has, you know, the color of background blue violet. See, this is where I talk about the content of and relative of the container is the heading itself. But if you put heading to have a padding of 5 pixel, watch what happens here. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger because you're putting padding around here, and relative to this raw text itself, you're putting a padding here. But the raw text already has its set of height. So what happened is it just adds a thicker padding toward to this heading 2. And yeah, so you can see how the padding relative to heading 2 is actually the raw text itself. So hopefully this makes sense. I know this is kind of confusing, but hopefully this makes sense though. But yeah, we can set this back. But yeah, and actually, this actually is a good example. You can see how this is 5 pixel. You're gonna have a padding 5 pixel here, 5 pixel up. You can see how this text, like when you highlight it, it has 5 pixel, 5 pixel, 5 pixel, all smacked around, like it's a padding, right? It all pads around this content. And yeah, cool. And we can talk about border, I guess. So border, there's not much to talk about, to be honest. So border, usually you'll have border. So the first one is going to be, you want to put, I'm pretty sure I think is the pixel, right? We can say 5 pixel. And then now we can do dotted border. So we can do dotted, or you can do solid. There are a bunch of like modes for like types of border, but usually I like solid. Actually, let's do dotted. Why not? And then we set the color. So we can set the color to beige. Why not? You can see it's a dotted border around there. And you can see, since we set it to container, you can see how it actually sits on top of the padding itself. So like if you close this, yeah, so you'll actually increase the size of it. You can see here. So it's a 5 pixel increase, and you can see this is the border around it, and it's dotted. And you can also do solid. In solid, obviously it's just going to be a line. You can see here. And then obviously the padding is going to be outside here. And that's going to be between we call elements to elements. Again, the only thing you really need to focus about, no one really cares about border, decide just like try it out, I guess. Like no one really uses them. They only use margin and padding. Just remember, margin is between elements and padding is within elements. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, so I guess we can move on to talk about a different unit. So for unit, there's mainly going to be like, I think I'm going to cover like 5. That's fine. So for container, we can set the width of a container, by the way. So we can set the width of a div. So here we can set a width of, we can do 50 pixel first, and a height as well. So a 50 pixel, and boom. it has the width and height. Obviously, there's overloading and stuff. So we're gonna actually make this a little bit bigger. 500. Okay, that's cool. So here we go. This is 500 and that's 500. You can see how this works out. So this whole entire container is going to be 500 and 500. Again, H2, it's a child of it. So it doesn't have the width and height applied. It still has its own width and height. So here it is. So that's 500 pixel. That's 500 pixel. So pixel are absolute units within CSS. So what I mean by this is that when you have pixel here, if you do 500 pixel, it's not going to change dynamically from your phone to your computer to your like whatever, your GPS. If you GPS does like, I don't know, website, who browses their website on GPS, never mind. Anyways, pixel is going to be, what I mean by this is pixel is going to be consistent throughout website, throughout like devices to devices. And that's all you need to know about pixels. So they're absolute values. It's kind of like you say 1 centimeter in real life. No one's gonna like 1 centimeter not gonna change. And like when you go from like, you know, Canada to like places like, I don't know, like Britain, like centimeter is not gonna change its size, right? So that's pixel in terms of web development. There's another thing. There's another absolute stuff called REM. So REM is the root font size of, so REM, R stands for root. So root element, so you don't really need to know about this, but by default, 1 REM, it's 16 pixels. So that's all you really need to know about this. So 5 REM, so 5 times 16, that's going to give you 80. So that's actually 80 pixel worth of left and top and bottom. And you can scale this a little bit more, 8 REM, 8 times 16 worth of pixel here. And that's all you really need to know about REM. And you're going to have something called EM. 8 EM. So what does EM mean? So EM is actually based on your font size. So font size is how you change the font size of your container. So every children is going to inherit this value unless it specifies it with itself. So font size, you can change it to, I guess, 1.2 of the root element. So actually 2, so 32 pixel. We change to 32 pixel. You can see how like without changing the width and height, we just change the font size and it's scaled, right? So this is a perfect, I guess, example of how width and height like EM works. It's based on the font size, the current font size. So the AEM is 8 times the current font size, and so on and so forth. So that's EM. And also like font size doesn't have to be REM, but most people uses REM. And it's actually a good practice to do that, but you can also do 20 pixel if you want. Like that works too. It's just like when you do font size professionally, you want to use REM. And that's it. All right, don't question it. Just use REM. And yeah. There is, yeah, okay. So we can also talk about percentage now. So we have set, you know, the div to have this amount of like, you know, size and whatever. Actually, just for the simplicity, I don't want to change the font size. Actually, we'll keep it 1 REM. We're going to change the width to like 500 pixel by like 800 pixel. We'll change this. That works. That's a little bit too much. We'll do 700. So 400 and 500. That should work. All right, cool. Okay, that's set up. And now we have 400 by 500 container. I guess what we can do now is in heading, we can try to use width as well. But now, since heading is a child of container, we can do 50%. With 50%, it's going to be 200, right? Quick math, 50% of 400 width, pixel width, it's going to be 200 pixel, right? Boom, it's halved. You know, how cool is that? And also you can set the height of this to 50% as well. And then boom, that's going to be 50% of the height, which is going to be 250 pixel. Boom, and that's it. So that is relative to your parent. So yeah, just remember with when you do percentage, is relative to your parent. So in terms of H2, your parent is going to be the div. That makes sense. And boom, that's about it. And I guess there's another one that we can talk about. Is what if we want to like talk in terms of view width, right? Like this whole entire screen width. Like how we're going to talk about in terms of that. Is the chat? Oh, okay. All right. So I keep sending code.
Oh, yeah. So the this workshop's points code is located in the chat. You can copy and paste that and use that in the Discord server. And back to you, Eston.
Yeah. Okay. So for width and height, what if we want to talk in terms of the whole entire screen, right? The view and screen size itself. So we have something called view width and view height. So 50% of the view width, we're expecting 50% of the screen over here. See, like there, which is true. And also we're expecting 50% of the view height as the height, which is going to be 50% here. Right about there. And when we change the size of it, you can see it always stays at 50%. And change that. So it's always going to be 50-50. And that stays true. Right? So that's view width, view height. And I think we covered everything here. So yeah, I guess we can also just move on to, I guess, more about, I guess, the elements. I mean, the CSS actual, properties of it. So properties, we talked about width and height already. We talked about border. We're going to talk about font properties now. Like font size, we've already said, like font size. I guess we can change the font size of heading here of 1 REM. Sorry, that's not right. But yeah, 1 REM. And that's going to change the size of this heading. We're going to change it to 2. That's going to change the heading as well. That's font size, and we can have font style as well. What if we want to italicize it, right? So we can do italic, boom, heading. And you might be wondering, well, you can just do the I thing that I talked about, like in the HTML, like you put an I tag around it, and it's going to do the same thing, yes. But for CSS purposes, I usually don't put I around these. I just like manually set it using CSS to italic. You can do that as well. And you might be talking about, what if I want bolding, right? There is something called font weight. You can do bold, and this is gonna bold your heading. But heading is already bolded, so we can actually just revert it back to normal, so you can see the differences. See, now it doesn't have the bolding anymore. And also we talked about font family, right? We can set the font family for everyone here to have, I guess, Arial and then sans serif. We did talk about earlier. This is the backup font, and that's the preferred font. And we changed this, and that's about it for the font. Yeah, and then we did talk about margin padding, and the box model. Oh, for the box model, another great example of how I learned it is I use this CSS box model, and this is such a good thing, template as well. Like you can do padding right, padding top, padding left. It talks about everything that you have to know about these CSS box model. It talks about display too, inline, block. I can't go in depth because time. But yeah, that's about it for that. And now I guess, yeah, I think that's about it. Okay, so there's one quick thing about display flex. So, all right, for this website, right? Want to talk about like, what if we add another h2 tag to this? And we say heading 2, we say Overwatch 2. It's cool, right? Put that there. And we see that like, since the style is block, how can we move this to take space over here, right? Like, what if we want to put a big container just like automatically, and when you have big size and it can shrink and expand, right? Like that would be really cool, right? So actually what we can do is actually, I'm going to set the width to 100% and the height to not specified. So then we can have this container to work with. We can see here, if you do on 100%, now we're gonna give margin padding to nothing. I don't like margin here. Just put that away and it will look something like this. So we can see more apparently what this is gonna do. And I don't wanna set width and height for the heading as well. I'm gonna expand everything. What if we wanna put the Overwatch 2 is cool right next to heading? And then when we keep squeezing it, it's gonna move down. So this is where dynamic responsive design happens. So this is where we can use something called a flexbox. So flexbox by its name is flexible, right? So how we enable flexbox is we can just do display flex, and boom, automatically it makes heading 2 and then Overwatch 2 is cool side by side. And that is, awesome. That is already what we want to do. And also, between H2 and H2, obviously I want to distinguish them. So I can use what we learned, a margin of, I guess, 2 pixel around them. So now there's going to be 2 pixels, so total of 4 pixel around these. And so we can separate them. And that's about it. And to further show this, we can do Overwatch. It's cool because super cool. And you can see how it doesn't wrap around. We want to wrap around. That's ultimately what we want to get out of this. So what we can do here is we can set the display. Flex wrap. There is something called flex wrap, and we can say wrap. And boom, it wraps around. And it does it automatically. See this? Boom. And that's super, super cool and useful. You can see when you have like a list of your project or whatever into cards, you can just put that and that automatically wraps it around. And that is super cool. Actually, I'll clean this code up a little bit, put that on top. And then there's also flex direction, right? Like what if instead of horizontally, we want to do vertically, we want to wrap it vertically, right? What we can do is we can set this to a flex direction of column. And boom, it's going to be columns as well, like just a bunch of columns. You can set it. So that is essentially just like, without flex. You can see, but this is actually kind of super useful as well, because when you set a specific height for this flex block, we can say like 500 pixel, right here, boom. And also we can just delete this annoying little thing so I don't have to see it. You can see there are extra spacing, right, around this. How can we space it out evenly? So we can use something called justified content. We can do space between, space evenly. We can center that. We can even center it. So we can center it, and then it's going to put everything into center. We can do space evenly, and it's going to space everything evenly. We can do space around. It's going to space around everything. And space around, the difference between space around, space evenly is that between the thing, you can see it's twice as much as on the border of it. But yeah, and yeah, I guess I think space between, We talk about that, space evenly. Yeah, we can have space around as well. Doesn't really change much. But yeah, those are the spacings. I think yeah, so for making a column, for making flex direction column, actually I'll set this back to row. And you can see when you do justify content row, it actually justified the content between horizontally. Like you can see horizontally it spaces around. Horizontally, when you do space evenly, horizontally spaces evenly, right? But how do we, you can see vertical spacing though, it's still not there. So how can we do that? So for, actually before that, I want to set a height of heading because heading right now it's evenly distributed between them. So I want to do a height of 50 pixel or actually 25, 25 pixel. And boom, you can see how it's not horizontally aligned. I mean, it's horizontally aligned, spaced evenly. What if we want to make it vertically spaced evenly right now, right? Because right now it looks kind of hideous and there's still extra space. We can do align items, and we can do center. So it's gonna pull everything into center. Or we can do space evenly as well. It's gonna space everything evenly. Oh, sorry. Make sure everything works here. Yep, spaces evenly. Oh. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so you can't really align item evenly. You can only align a center. Sorry, my bad. And yeah, and when you align everything in the center, it's going to put everything into the center of its column. So when you look at this, when you hover it, you do flex, it's going to pull everything up in the center and everything is going to look very centered vertically. But you can also do something called end, right? Flex end. And it's going to pull everything into end. Oh, sorry. It's going to pull everything into end. And you can also do flex start. It's going to pull everything up on the start. And that's how you align it vertically. And that's a quick rundown of, I guess, just Flexbox. Flexbox is another useful tool you can use. Again, I think I explained it poorly. Sorry about that. But yeah, you guys can read my doc if you are confused. And quickly, I don't think I have enough time for this script JS, but I can do a really just a quick JS, but also like JS very similar to Python. So I guess takes least amount of time to learn for you all that attended last week's content. So what if we have a div here? All right, in this div, we're gonna have an ID. I'm gonna do it super fast. And we're gonna call it button. We're gonna give a button called we'll call it BTN because button might be a keyword. And then this button is just gonna be a button. So in this here, this is all done. So this is all done. So I'm gonna delete it. And I'm just gonna talk about the script itself. So change it back. All right. So first of all, button is there. All right. You can't see it right now because it doesn't have any dimensions whatsoever, right? So what we can do is we can go over here in the styling. We can give a style, right? We can do btn and give a width of 50 pixel, height of 50 pixel. Why not? And still nothing, you know, because you'll also need to give it a background color, right? Blue, and boom. And that's my little button that I want to do. So what you can do with this is within this, there's an attribute called onClick. And you can put a function. Actually, I don't want to explain it like this. And in script, in JavaScript, you can have declare a variable using let var, so let number equal to 1. So this is really, really similar to Python. So if I'm going to say something that's really similar to Python, like a language, up on top of my mind, it's going to be JavaScript because it's actually very, very similar. But there are probably other languages that are more similar to it, but this is very similar. And then you can have str, so a string, right? We did talk about string. And there's another type, it's called boolean. Let boolean equals true or false. So boolean is true or false. A string is a string of characters, and the number. So the difference between Python and JavaScript is that number in JavaScript includes decimals and whole numbers or integers, I mean. And in Python, you have float and you have int, which are two different things. So that's like the real difference between like JavaScript and Python in terms of its value types. Anyways, so how we're gonna print out these stuff is we can do console.log and we can do 5. I mean like number actually. So it should return a 1. So you know, how do we get the console, right? If you do inspect right here, it has a console and then it logs it. So it's 1, right? That's what we're expecting. We can do str. So it's gonna say a string, boom. And then you do boolean, it should print out true. Boom, true. There we go. That's how you print out stuff. And I guess we're gonna do something where you click on it, you can change the content of the text of this button. And I think that's pretty cool. And that's what we're gonna end off with. So what you can do is you can do a function. So function, again, you learned from, you know, from, I guess, last week, you can do a function. We're gonna do a function of change HTML. So we can just do change HTML. So this takes, I guess, no parentheses. So we can do is we can console log, we have to get this div, right? We have to get this div. How we're gonna get the div is we're gonna use something called document.query selector. So query selector allows you to just put CSS selectors. So CSS select an ID, you put a hashtag and do a button. So we're gonna store this, let button equals query selector button. So this is gonna give us this button node. And what we can do is we can change the button content within this. So this is the inner HTML. When you talk about inner HTML, within this div, this is the inner HTML. So what we can do is we can do button.inner HTML. We can change it to hello world. I'm going to do this real quick. Since we have like 2 minutes left, I can speed on this. And then in here, we can call this function by do onClick, right? Because when we want to click, want to change the HTML. And hopefully this works. And then you can have hello world, boom, when you click on it. And you know, that's pretty cool, right? Again, you can put raw content in here like ASD, 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 and you click on it, it's gonna change ASD to hello world. It's gonna replace everything. So that's about it. And oh, one thing pretty cool is that you can also let I guess input equal to whatever you want to input, right? You can input by using something called prompt. And I say enter a message. So what a prompt does, and then you can set the input to prompt. It's kind of like parse. It's kind of like input. It's just essentially input. Yeah, for Python. So when you click on it, it's gonna ask for what do you want to do. We can say Overwatch. I actually type Overwatch really fast because I do that all the time. And then boom, it's gonna set it to Overwatch because we asked for it. We're gonna put it there, and it's gonna be Overwatch. Don't worry about the selling because we set it to 50-50 pixel. The width is gonna be 50 pixel here. Like what we can do actually is we can set a min width. A min width is gonna do automatically. Oh yeah. Anyways, hopefully you guys can get a hold of this. I think the time's up. Is it 3:15 that we have to go?
We have 15 more minutes.
Wait, do we have 15 more minutes?
Yes, we do.
Oh, wait a second. Okay. Well, I didn't even have to rush it then. Oh, I thought we have to go at 3:15. Wow. Then I guess I can even talk in depth about it. So yeah. After the query selector, we can actually append a child to it, right? Remember how we did the container with the flexbox, right? We can actually, something cool is that we can actually ask for items by clicking on it, and then we input something, and then we can put the flex box and we can append something to that flex box, right? And that would be pretty cool. So it can be useful for like, you want to put something in there, you can put there, and it's going to put that in the flex box container. So that's what we're going to do. And that was supposed to be the lesson plan. So I guess I'm going to do that real quick. So we're going to set this up again, div, right? We want to have a big container to contain of all our like kind of headers. So I guess paragraph or headers we want to put. We want to call it the container. I guess task container. We can put our task in there. Task container. And then within this task container, we can have, again, we want to use the flexbox, right? Because it's a big container, and we know how good flexbox is when you like want to change the width, right? So we can do display flex. And again, for a task container, when you do display flex, another cool thing you can do, I forgot to mention, is that you can do min width. So min width 50 pixel is that minimum is going to have 50 pixel on the width, and minimum, we can do minimum height. We want 50 pixel here. Boom. And also, obviously, we want to set the background color so we can see this whole entire container. We'll set the background color to what cool color we want to do. Light cyan, sure, why not? Actually, it looks bad. We can do green. That looks fine. Okay. So that's the minimum width and minimum height you can see, but it takes the whole entire width right now because you have nothing in there. But yeah, so we can change that. Okay, so we want to put a bunch of headers inside this task container containing whatever we want to put. I'm thinking, so when we click on this container, it's going to ask us a prompt saying, what do we want to do? What's the task name, right? If you put the task name in there and you click on OK, it's going to generate a header, and it's going to put a header in here. So if we're going to ask for what we want to put, and we want to, and then we say like, well, we got to wash the dishes, wash the dishes. And then it's going to appear as wash dishes up here. And then we just keep appending H2 tags, Obviously, we've got to use flex wrap, right? It's going to keep appending these things. And also, we can do, so we can make these H2 have a class called task, right? So in task, we can select this task. We can set these schemes to have, I don't know, like we can set the font size, right? We can set the font size to be a little bit smaller, 0.5 rem, so half of the rem. Oh, that's actually too small. 1 rem. Okay, that's fine. And then we can do like background. We can set a background to distinguish each task, right? We can set it to coral. Cool. And it's gonna have that. And I guess we can set I think that's it. I think that's good, Coral. And then we can do actually margin, right? We're gonna do margin between tasks. We're gonna say, I want 2 pixels between tasks. So we can try it out, populate them. Boom, a lot of them. Cool. That works. And you can see like when it doesn't, when it expands out, as wash the dishes, but it's not in the middle. You can see how wash the dishes is not in the middle. Again, a cool trick that I usually do with wash dishes, like wash dishes, it's a part of content. So what we can do is we can set task to have a display of flex. And it shouldn't change anything right now. Yeah, it doesn't change anything. Well, with display flex, what we can do is we can set align items to center, and also we can do justify content to center. What it should do is centers everything inside here. And that's a super cool trick you can pull off. Like when you use Flexbox, a main thing that I usually use, I find out using it is I usually center it. Like I use this for centering stuff. Like right now, right? Since wash dishes, it's the content of H2, right? It's the raw text wash the dishes is the content of H2. What you can do is you can center this content by justify the content into center and align the item into center is going to pull everything into center. And that's where I find really useful, where like Flexbox, I guess like 40% of the time you're going to be using Flexbox just to center stuff. And this is pretty useful for that. And centering stuff, you just need to set the display to flex, justify content center, align item center. And that's a cool trick you can pull off. So with that done, obviously we don't want to populate it by ourselves. We want to use JavaScript to populate it for us. What we can do is, first of all, we need to get the container itself, right? So what we can do is actually we can just reuse the code here, container, and we're going to query select with the class container. So with the class now, right, it's going to be a dot and then task container. So that's going to be a reference to our container. And then what we can do is we have to ask, right? Like when you click on it, you're going to have a prompt asking what the task is, right? So task, so let task content equal to a prompt. What is the task? And that's going to be a prompt. And then after you put all the prompt, you want to make an H2, right? So how we're going to do that is we're going to create an H2 like from our JavaScript. And then we're going to put this H2, we're going to append it. So container is kind of like a list in Python. And we're going to append this newly created H2 tag into that container. And that's how we're going to add it to the container. So what we're going to do is first create. So in here, I should talk about, yeah. So new element. So we're going to create this element. So let a new task element equal to document dot create element, right? And create element here. And what we can do here is it's going to need the tag name or the element name. For in this case, we want the H2, right? So we want to create an H2 tag. And now what we can do is we can manipulate this new task element here to have a class. So again, you can see there's a class list and class name. So class name directly, you can change this. So what class name is essentially is just a reference to the class. So you're directly changing this part, this content. You're giving the string of the class. So for this one, we're only gonna have the class of task in here, right? Because in the H2 that we just did, we can see here, we have a bunch of tasks, class equals task. So we're gonna set it equal to task, cool. And now we're going to append this new task, right? We've done manipulating it, right? We have, oh, actually, right, almost forgot. Right, we got to change the inner HTML equal to the task content that we are asked for, right? That's cool. And now we have finished manipulating this new task element. We can do it, we can append it, right? We can put it inside this list of this container as a child. So it's called append child, and we put this node in here. So when you create a new element, this reference is called a node, an HTML element. This is an HTML element. And then when you append child, it asks for an HTML element. And then you can append this element in here. So now we can test this out by, again, on click. We're going to use change HTML function. And this should work out fine. Obviously, we don't want to populate it yet. Click on it. Hello. Boom. We're going to have hello. And we keep clicking on it. I love Overwatch. Here. Overwatch 2 beta coming soon. Boom. Oh, God. And, you know, we can do scan it. Whatever. And when you change it, boom, automatically style it for us. Pretty cool, right? Pretty neat. And that's about it. I guess we have 3 minutes left. We can talk about if statements. So in here, prompt, right? Like, what if we do cancel, right? Like, what if we cancel it? What does cancel do, right? Like, we can do, like, we can console log this real quick. We say task content, right? We can see, like, what if we print out the task content? Like, what does it say if we actually just like, if we just say no? So it becomes null. So, you know, if you're a Minecrafter, you might be hearing this null stuff like, oh, it's the end of the world, whatever. What does null really mean? Null just means nothing. You have nothing, not a single thing, right? So we can do here is we can have a while loop. So while task content. So a while loop, you just do the same thing. Task content, it's not it's equal to, I guess equal null. We just keep asking them until we're gonna have it. So task content is going to be prompt. What is the task? And obviously we gotta set this to null first. So then it's going to be in a while loop. And if it's equal to null, it's going to keep asking until it's not null anymore, which means it's going to actually give us some input, right? What is the task cancel? What is task? It's going to annoy you. It's going to cancel, right? Doesn't really work. So then we got to say Overwatch. Boom. And now it works, right? So that's just a simple while loop, right? And also you can do here, when you get task content, you can do if task content equals null. Again, that's if statement, right? That's how you do the if statement. You can say console. We can do something called alert, actually. Alert is going to give you a big alert. Say, you gotta input something, man. Right. Do that. Oh, sorry. Where did that go? So if that's nothing, you gotta input something, man. You gotta input something, man. Oh, you gotta input it. And that's how you do these if statement. Again, it's just gonna keep asking you stuff, and then as soon as you put something null, it detects it, it's gonna alert you gotta put something. And it's gonna keep going while loop until it breaks, right? And we can do a for loop, I guess, a quick for loop. So for loop, you know, like in JavaScript, it's very different. So it's for I equals 0, I is less than whatever, so 9, and then I plus plus. So what this means, it's in Python, it essentially means the Python equivalent is it's for I in range of 9. that you guys learned last week. So this is for I in range 9. So you're gonna start off I as 0, and you're gonna make I less than 9, and then I is gonna plus. It's gonna increase by 1, or plus equals 1. So it's gonna for every loop, it starts off with 0, and every time it's less than 9, it keeps the loop going until it's equal to 9, because it's a strictly less than. If it's equal to 9, then it breaks the loop. So we can console log this I element, and we should see, and we should see it working at least. And we can pull this outside. We'll load this in here. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? But then the ninth one, it's not going to print because it goes back to a loop. It's like, oh, wait, it's at 9 now, but 9, it's not less than 9, it's equal to 9. So we don't go in this loop anymore, and we're going to get the hell out of here, you know? And that's why it's not going to print a 9, but it's going to start out with 0, entering in, and then you add one each time. And that's how for loop works. And also you can add 2 as well. And that's going to work as well. And 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then at 10, it's going to be like, oh, wait, 10 is going to be greater than 9. So that's not going to let you in the loop again. And you can also start the I with 1. It's going to be 1, 3, 5, 7. And then at 9 equals 9. It's not going to go in. It's the same thing. And yeah, hopefully you guys learned something. I know JavaScript was kind of rushed. Again, an hour and 30 minutes, honestly, it's not that much for me to like go in depth about everything. Again, you know, if you know, like this website still looks bad, right? Like you just gotta learn a lot about this. Like it's not gonna take you like an hour and 30 minutes to get like all this stuff and make a beautiful website, right? So I encourage you guys after my workshop to look online. There's a lot of good YouTube videos. There's a website, a YouTuber called Web Dev Simplify that I learned these things from, and he is super useful, and talked about like flex boxes in depth, talks about something like all the elements and stuff. And he's where I got these cheat sheet from. And he's really knowledgeable. So for this summer, if you have nothing to do, I encourage you guys to build your own website. And that is what I did last year, summer. And that's how I got into web development. And you know, just a year of just doing this, I become very good at it. And, you know, just make a website. And also it's pretty cool to show the unis, you know. And yeah, hopefully you guys at least learn something. Again, if my voice is confusing, go on the doc, look at it, and see if you miss something. And also just, I guess, search up online for tutorial if you're really into it. Make your own website, make your own little project, and that's your next step. And thank you.
Yeah, and you can always ask Eston any questions. Just make sure you make a ticket using the ticket tool. And yeah, thank you for attending today, this workshop. We have an hour break until our next one. So take a break from your computer, kind of recover from that Zoom fatigue, maybe have a snack, drink of water, and we'll see you at our final workshop for today, web requests and APIs. Thank you for attending.
Yep. All right. See y'all. Goodbye. Take care.